For those who are listening, welcome. And I'm Sharif Abdullah. I got that much right. And I'm going to be present with you today to talk about um, a few concepts that I think are important for all of us nowadays. And those concepts are dealing with, and the title to my talk is Spiritual Discipline in Turbulent Times. Uh, we've got a pretty good handle on the turbulent part, okay? We can look at our, what's going on in our planet right now. We can look at our, uh, what's happening on our streets. We can look at COVID. We can look at all of the things that are happening as a result of the mishandling of COVID. And we can see that turmoil is our name. That's the thing that's driving almost all of our conversations right now. However, the problem is that the problem is bigger than what the media is showing us. Now, the media is showing us this huge problem, and what I'm suggesting is we can't get around that huge problem because we don't see the bigger problem. It's like a person with lung cancer, and they're coughing their head off, and somebody gives them a cough drop. Well, yeah, they're coughing, so you give them a cough drop. But that means you didn't understand the problem, because a cough drop is not going to solve their challenge. So the thing that we need to look at is what is the most profound issue that we have to deal with. And then from there, we can then say, this is the biggest and this is the most profound solution that we have. So in order to look for the biggest issue, I'm going to read something from my book, Creating a World That Works for All. And if you buy it, you actually get a better copy than this. This has been with me for 20 years now, so it's a bit battered. And I want to read to you from the introduction. And the introduction was supplied by President Václav Havel, who was at the time, the late President Václav Havel, who was the president of the Czech Republic. And he graciously supplied the introductory essay to my book. And in the introduction, Havel says, humankind today is well aware of the spectrum of threats looming over its head. We know that the number of people living on our planet is growing at a soaring rate. We already know that the already deep abyss separating the planet's poor and rich could deepen further. We also know that we've been destroying the environment on which our existence depends, and that we're headed for disaster by producing weapons of mass destruction and allowing them to proliferate. And yet, even though we're aware of these dangers, we do almost nothing to avert them. How crazy are we? We see what's happening. The car's going at 120 miles an hour. We see the cliff ahead of us, and we're trying to step on the gas, thinking that we're going to make it all the way over to the other mesa 2 miles away. We do that because our challenge is what do we do with the magnitude of the problem? And this becomes the thing that drives us. We all know the Albert Einstein quote that says, you cannot solve the problem at the same level of consciousness that created the problem in the first place. We see that quote, some of us have it hanging on our walls, and then we try to solve the problem with the same consciousness that created the problem in the first place. So I'm suggesting something to you today. And what I'm suggesting to you is that we try to work towards solving the problem at a completely different level. Now, that different level is inside of us, and it needs to come out. I want to say something, and it's what I'm about to say has been taken the wrong way sometimes. So let me make sure I'm saying this the right way. In the upcoming elections, I so strongly suggest that you vote. It is your civic right. It's also your civic responsibility. Um, vote. Vote early. Get your ballot in the mail if you're doing mail ballots. I'm in Oregon, and we've been doing this for a long time. I've got my ballot box right here, um, and so vote for the candidate of your choice. Vote for the candidate that reflects the nature of who you are inside. Okay, and then the day after the election, go to work, because that won't solve anything. Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump are at the level of consciousness that created the problem in the first place. One of them will make the problem worse. One of them will try to make the problems go away. But the bottom line is we need to understand the magnitude of the problem, and we, meaning me and you, have to elevate our consciousness to the point that we can actually see the problem and then see the solution. Havel listed, when I read the quote from Václav Havel, he listed 5 or 6 of the key elements that's driving our world apart. I have in my book, in Creating a World That Works for All, a list of 30 different problems that are causing us to face our ruin. Things like population explosion, suicide, holes in the ozone layer, political corruption, homelessness, extinction of species, sexism, racism, overuse of fertilizers, global climate change, unsustainability in all aspects of our life, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, when you see that, when you read the news, you have a tendency to get overwhelmed. And you either, you take the first thing that's sitting in front of you or the first thing that the media shoves at you, and you work on that and you ignore all the other 49 issues going on. I'm suggesting to you something different. I'm suggesting to you that those are not 50 different problems. I'm suggesting to you that those are the 50 symptoms of one problem. And once we resolve the one problem, those 50 symptoms go away. Until you resolve the one problem, the 50 symptoms, you may chip at one of the symptoms. You may think you've worked on it, and then it blows up again. How many of us thought that we had worked on, for example, racism? For those of you who are the children of the 60s, for those of you who have the same amount of gray that they're looking at in the mirror every morning, we know what our problem is. We know what that we honestly and sincerely tried to address the issue of racism and discrimination in our society. We know the different programs, the diversity programs, the affirmative action programs. We know all this stuff. So what happened? Why do we had riots in our streets back in the 60s, and now it's 2020 and we're having racial riots in our street again? Well, I think the answer is really simple. We didn't solve the problem back then. We tried to solve that problem with the same level of consciousness that created it in the first place, and it didn't go away. It went underground, it morphed a little bit, and it popped right back up. So, what is this problem? And the problem is a problem of consciousness. The problem that we've got is that we are holding a particular kind of consciousness in this world. In my book, I call this the breaker consciousness. This is the consciousness that breaks our pact with the divine. It breaks our pact with all other beings on this planet. It breaks our pact with ourselves. How many people in this society are clinically depressed? How many people in this society are pre-suicidal? And how long will we allow that to go on before we actually do something about it? And the doing something about it means that we have to change this society. And some of you are going to say, oh yes, I'm ready to change this society. I'm going to vote. No, that's you're changing the window dressing on the old society. If you're going to change this society, you've got to start with a blank sheet of paper and a clean mind and a clean heart. You've got to start from the beginning and say, what are we about? What are we about? What am I about as an individual? What are we about as a family? What are we about as a neighborhood? What are we about as a city or a town? What are we about as a nation? And then you don't stop there. What are we about as a human family on this planet? We're one family that is amazingly dysfunctional. What are we about as one species on a multi-species planet? What are we about as the representation of the divine driving down the highway? The representation of the divine pushing a shopping cart in the grocery store. What are we about as a representation of the divine as we go about living our lives? Now, most of us think about this stuff on Sundays, or Saturdays if that's your day of worship, or Fridays if that's your day of worship. But most of the time, we don't act like this. Most of the time, we don't have an understanding of our of who we are, what we are, where we're supposed to be going. I'm inviting you to that understanding now. I'm inviting you to think about how do we face the turbulent times that we're in, and what are some of the tools that are available to us right now to get us through these times. I think something is necessary for us to be active. That is, those are three things. I call them the 3 Ds. We need direction, we need devotion, and we need discipline. And I'm suggesting to you not just because this is the title to my talk today, but I'm suggesting to you that we need spiritual direction. I'm suggesting to you that we need spiritual devotion. And I'm suggesting to you that we need spiritual discipline. Now, many of us get really twitchy when we start talking like that, especially in public forums, like not in church on Sunday, but in our daily practices. A lot of us get twitchy like that because we're not used to doing it, and many of us still conflate the notion of spirituality with religion. Now, I am not talking about religion. You can practice any religion you want, or you can practice none at all. But when I talk about having spiritual direction, spiritual devotion, and spiritual discipline, I'm talking about something that lies deeper than our than what practice do you do on Sunday or Saturday or Friday. What I'm suggesting is that your spiritual direction comes from your heart and the hearts of all of those around you. We need to get out of our ego self. And the only way we can do that is with help. And the help that we get, the help that we need, is the help that's being driven out of my heart. But we have a way, the ego self is so powerful and so tricky that we can start telling ourselves, oh, that's really, the ego walks around the corner, puts another hat on and says, hi, I'm your heart. And this is what I'm thinking about doing now. And if you're saying that in words, then no, you're not in your heart. Okay. So, and the thing that can help you get truly into your heart is when you are working at a heart level with other beings, with other people. I don't know how many of you remember a few years ago the Occupy phenomena. I don't call it a movement. It could have become a movement, but it got derailed really, really quickly. But for several months, this was occupying all of the media all around the country. There were people doing occupations. The people were acting out of their frustration with the system. And there's tons and tons of pent up frustration. And then it goes away. And now we have the activities that are happening as a consequence of the George Floyd murder. And I'm living right here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm sitting at ground central for all of that stuff. And people are upset, people are angry. There are demonstrations literally one block that way, okay? And in the demonstrations, there are people who come out and they're holding up the pro George Floyd anti-police signs, and then other people are going down the street honking their horns, either in support or yelling things out the window. All lives matter, not just Black Lives Matter. And people are getting more and more upset. And then there's a police helicopter hovering over the whole thing. And I'm saying, okay, in 3 or 4 months, this is all going to go away, because you cannot maintain a movement with anger. You cannot maintain a movement with fear. You cannot maintain a movement with ignorance. There's 3 things that maintain your movement. It's called direction, devotion, and discipline. If you can't tell me what your vision is in one sentence, then you don't know what your vision is. And if you don't have a vision, all you're doing is spinning energy and having no movement, no action, no forward momentum. I say this as a child of the 60s. I say this as a former, I thought of myself as a revolutionary then. I now know that I'm a revolutionary now. And I saw myself, even as a teenager, creating a world that works for all Black people. And I say that because I could see television and all white people were fine. All white people were having a ball, okay? And there's only Black people who are having problems. It took me going to college before I realized that some white people were having problems too. And it took me graduating from college to recognize that all of us have problems. And all of us are being negatively impacted by society, even when we falsely are told or falsely believe that we're being benefited by the society that is driving us crazy. And back then, in that environment, I could see that if you did, I kept trying to ask myself and the folks I was working with, what's the goal? Where are we trying to get to? And I was watching how reluctant people were trying to were saying that. Because once you set a goal, you're going to be held to that goal. Once you set a goal, we have something to measure your forward progress. So when I look at an organization like Black Lives Matter, and I encourage you to go to their website, and then I want you to tell me what the goal is. Is the goal just to get a yard sign in every window? Okay, once you do that, so what? We still have the society that grinds people up. Is the goal to dismantle the police department? Well, good luck with that. What takes its place? What's the vision of the society that you would like to live in? And that should become the motivating factor for you. My direction should not be coming from an individual, or my direction should not be coming from any of the systems and structures created by all of the dead white guys of 200 or 300 years ago. We are smart enough right now to come up with our own system. And we're spiritual enough right now to come up with a system that does not reflect the fear, the isolation, the creating a world that works for me and my friends that our existing systems are based on. So along with direction and devotion and discipline, there's some things that we need to know. We need to know what we're doing. We need to know why we're doing it. And we also need to know how we win. How do we set the party? How do we have the celebration? How do we know when we get the results that we're actually wanting? This is one of the problems that we've got, is that if you don't, and I forget who said this, if you don't know what your destination is, all winds blow ill. It's like going down the street in your car, driving on the highway, and taking any exit you want to take, continuing to go on the way that you've been going without recognizing what you are trying to do. I would suggest to you that your goal is, and my goal is, because I'm wearing it on my chest right here, is creating a world that works for all. Creating a world that works for all beings. Creating a world that works for all of us in this society and all of us in every other society. I suggest that we are creating a world that works for all of us who have bodies and for all of us who are beyond their bodies. That what we are doing is creating a world, not where everyone has everything equally. I think that is actually a bad idea. But I think that we're creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to live a decent life. That everybody has an opportunity to work hard. Everyone has an opportunity to understand their own inner worth. And this is something that really bothers me when I'm walking down the street and I'm seeing different classes of homeless people. And one of the classes that bothers me the most are the young folks. People in their teens or early 20s, and the look on their face of being utterly wasted. They remember I think it was the United Negro College Fund had the slogan, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." Well, that's true for Black people. It's also true for white people. It's true for everybody, okay? Let's not waste the minds and the hearts. We've managed to create a system that doesn't need people, which is really, really amazing. We've managed to create a system where I don't need the system and the system doesn't need me. And this is a recipe for disaster. This is a recipe for us um, uh, being this is a recipe for us to get somewhere. And this is one of the hardest things I've had to learn this year. I've been operating from a premise, and I believe it's the same premise that you've been operating from. And that premise is that we really can fix this particular system, okay? If we work hard enough, if we, really apply ourselves, we can fix this system. At the same time, I've been using the analogy of the caterpillar and the butterfly. I'm saying, we've had this caterpillar society that's been eating the garden of the world, okay? And if any of you have gardens, if you've had caterpillars in your garden, you know what a caterpillar can do, okay? It is an eating machine. And then at some period of time, some point in time, answering a call from the transcendent, the caterpillar attaches its butt to a twig, spins a chrysalis, dissolves completely, and then out pops this beautiful, gorgeous butterfly. Okay. Right now, what we're seeing on our streets is what it looks like inside the chrysalis when the caterpillar dissolves. The caterpillar comes apart completely and turns into goo. When I was a kid, I was on a bicycle and I ran my bicycle through some brush, and I happened to run over a chrysalis, and it popped open. This is right when the caterpillar had finished turning to goo. And I had to wash this caterpillar off of my tire, so I can tell you it is definitely goo. Now, inside that chrysalis, inside the goo, there's some very different cells at work. And those different cells are the ones that hold the pattern and the promise of the butterfly. The butterfly is not in those cells. The butterfly is in a transcendent place. The butterfly is in the place of the divine. We keep wanting to turn everything into this mechanical action. You know, well, the DNA of the butterfly, it's like, it sounds really good. But just like the voice of your parents or the voice of your children are not in the telephone, the telephone allows you to receive them. It doesn't create the voice. The voice isn't there. Just like that, the butterfly is not in that chrysalis. The butterfly comes through the imaginal cells. The butterfly comes through in such a way that it then organizes those cells in a completely different way. It is so amazing. A being with, 20 legs walks in, a being with 6 legs walks out. A being that has no consciousness whatsoever of flying, where flying is an impossibility, comes out and it spreads its wings and flies. Our change from what we are to what we're going to be, it has to be that profound. Our change from what we are to what we need to be is miraculous. We're in the middle of a miracle, and let's not sell ourselves short by stopping short of the goal line and say, oh no, this is really just about racism. This is just about sexism. This is just about climate change. This is just about getting rid of Trump. It's not about any of that stuff. What it's about is, are we going to ascend to our rightful place in our society and in our universe? Are we going to step up to change that consciousness, like Einstein said? Are we going to change our consciousness so that we begin to do something that human beings have never done on this planet before? And that's think of ourselves as beings, as living beings on a living planet. Not like enemies, not like slaves, not like something you can ignore or something you can bow down to, or something that you can use when it's convenient for you and forget the rest of the time. I can keep going like this forever, and I'm not supposed to. So I'm going to share 2 things with you, and then I'm going to stop. I have to tell you an aside. The scrolling window wasn't scrolling for me, so I saw the first 3 comments. I didn't think anybody else was making any comments, so I thought I was just talking into a vacuum. And now I see there's a lot of comments that were made. I can't read them because I can't see that small unless I put my glasses on. So what I'm going to do is give you my 2 comments, and then I will look in this comment box and see if there are any questions for me. Um, and I will, and then we'll play it by ear. How about that? Um, so the issue I want to tell you about has to do with this object. I'll see if I can find it here. Right under my finger there, this white pillar with the black dot and the barbed wire around it. That's on my little makeshift altar back there. And what this thing is a candle, and wrapped around that candle is a piece of barbed wire and a piece of a fire brick. And that barbed wire came from the Auschwitz concentration camp, as well as the fire brick. And that piece of barbed wire, when I was at Auschwitz, wrapped around my leg and would not let go. And that is a reminder for me. That's the common way candle. And that reminds me of what we need to be doing and how deeply we need to be doing this. This is not a joke. This is not a it's not make-believe. It's not pretend. When I was at Auschwitz, I was struck by how powerful our connection with each other is, and how powerfully we can deny it. How I can deny even your right to exist. I can deny your humanity. I can turn you into an animal. And then sit back and say, oh, I wonder why they're acting like animals. What we have to do is elevate to the entire, the totality of what we're supposed to be doing here. So my last point, and I could find, I have on my book, I have almost every page marked. So it's hard for me to actually find, I have to find the pages that are not marked. But this is a quote from a Brazilian theologian by the name of Rubem Alves. And I like this guy so much. He's actually got two quotes in my book. So, and Rubem Alves says, "What is hope? It is the presentiment that imagination is more real and reality is less real than it looks. It is the hunch that the overwhelming brutality of facts that oppress and repress are not the last word. It is the suspicion that reality is more complex than realism wants us to believe. That the frontiers of the possible are not determined by the limits of the actual. And that in a miraculous and unexpected way, life is preparing the creative events which will open the way to freedom and resurrection." We're talking about the freedom and the resurrection of the human spirit. That's our task. Everything else is just a subset of that task. Once we hold the goal, once we see the vision, once we are applying our 3Ds, our direction, our devotion, and our discipline, getting there is assured. The butterfly is assured. All you have to do is keep focusing on the butterfly. As the caterpillar turns to goo, it's what it does. And all of those caterpillar cells get used by the butterfly. It starts marching to a different tune. And I think it's about time that that happens. So, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for having me. This has been quite a challenge and an interesting focus. Um, I've noticed a couple of questions. I'm going to try my very best. This is a very Facebook is a different format for me for doing live work, and I'm going to see if I can put this in as a comment. And what this is the, let's see, it didn't work yet. Okay, yes it did. What I just did was put in a link to get my book, Creating a World That Works for All. And it is, so someone asked the question, how do you get this philosophical mindset? I would strongly recommend that you read that book. I keep telling people, I really wish that that someone else wrote my book so that I could praise it without sounding like an egotist. After 20 years, we have I spoke with the publisher, and he said after 20 years it's time for a revised edition, etc. Do you want to do a revised edition? And I read the book, I read it again, and they were reading the book also, and we all said, no, this book is still as valid today as it was 20 years ago. And so so that becomes our challenge. I see a question from Diane, who says, what do you mean by ascend to a rightful place? What I mean is, and this gets into my first book, which is The Power of One, Authentic Leadership in Turbulent Times, is that we get to live lives of authenticity. We get to live I get to live my life in such a way that everything I'm doing and everything about my society is reinforcing a really powerful sense of I belong here, I'm doing the right thing, and this is the path that all of us should be on. I've been to, I guess, about 45 different countries in the world. And I also quickly say I've been to about 120, 130, 140 different cultures. Many of us, when we leave this country, we go right into an environment that we're familiar with. I don't. I've been in the mud huts. I've been in the tropics where people are sharing their rice with me. I've eaten with forks. I've eaten with fingers. I've eaten with chopsticks. I know how to do all of that. And we start talking. We talk about experiencing those cultures, and in many cultures, people are living the lives of their ancestors, and they're living the lives of they're paving the way for their descendants. I'd like to share one example with you, if I may. And this happened some years ago. And it happened in Indonesia on the island of Bali. And when I go somewhere, I want to get as far away from tourists, especially American tourists, as I can get. And this particular trip, I have friends in Bali, and this friend invited me to his temple ceremony. And it's a big deal when you get invited by a native Balinese to a temple ceremony. And I was dressed appropriately. I had on my Balinese sarong and I had my head wrapped, and I had the white flower behind one ear and the red flower behind the other ear. Um, Beautiful ceremony. And actually, if you sign into my YouTube channel, I think I put that ceremony up on the, I videotaped parts of it, and I put the ceremony up on the YouTube channel. Um, but afterwards, my friend Langdon invited me to his family compound. And there's this outdoor pavilion, and then there's several houses in the compound. And we were sitting at the outdoor pavilion, and there's this wonderful rain that was falling. And Langdon was sitting with his back to his son. They were sitting back to back, kind of supporting each other. And this was his son's first dance in the village ceremony. So the son was costumed, etc. And Langdon was real. That's why Langdon wanted me to come. He was really proud of his son. And I kept asking him, like, how does this work? How do you know your place in the world? And so Langdon said, I live in that house over there. So he points to the house. And he said, but my parents used to live in that house, but now they live in this house over here. He points to another house, and there's two old people sitting on the porch that are his parents. And whenever he points to them, they would wave. They don't speak any English at all, but every time they would smile and wave. And he said, when we get older, the parents, and they smile and wave, are going to go back there in the cemetery. We have a cemetery right on the grounds. They'll be planted back there. And I will move from that house to their house, to where they are right now. And he points back to his son, will move into that house, and he'll be, the head of this compound. And I've got some brothers and sisters in the other houses in this area. And then when I got planted in the back, he moves over here, and he says, we've been doing this for at least 1,000 years. And he said, my son can do anything he wants to do. He said, if he wants to go to college, he can go to college. If he wants to go a trade, if he wants to move to some other country, but he always knows he has a place to be. He always knows that he has a home. So when I'm hearing that, I'm recognizing how starved I am, how I don't have that experience. This is my home back here. This is where I live. I had someone come over who had seen some of my videos. They said, oh, I thought that was a studio. It's like, yeah, this is my studio, but it's also my home. But I don't have 1,000-year connection to it. My children live in Atlanta. They live in Kansas City. They don't have a connection to any of that themselves. Their children are now moving to different places, etc. So our challenge is, can we plant ourselves on this earth in such a way that we know who we are, where we are, what we are? Can we plant ourselves in such a way that we're not denying any of our experience? If you want to be a rocket scientist, you should be a rocket scientist. But you should always know where your home is. You should always know that we're doing something, that every action that I take is doing something that will heal the planet, that will heal ourselves, that will heal all beings, and be working and living that. Uh, I see a question over in the box, and I'm thinking, I'm feeling fairly frisky here that um, uh, the Reverend Jeffrey, which is really interesting, me saying that because he started as a student of mine. Um, the um, he said, talk for 30 or 40 minutes, so I'm way over time. Um, but let's plan on going another 10, maybe 15 minutes, and I'll try to respond to some of the things I'm seeing in the box. And I'll try to keep my responses short so that we can I can respond to as many as possible. Says how do we manifest the world we want daily? That's the challenge. Okay. Let me give you a quick example of how not to do that. I have a friend who is deeply spiritual, deeply um, uh, considers herself a spiritual practitioner, meditates every day, does her yoga. Um, I see somebody says my home is in nature. She's definitely. I've been with her in nature and watching her bloom, etc. And she's got a job, and her job is to review the applications for the coal shipments that pass through Oregon on their way to China. So we're strip mining the whole state of Wyoming right now. We're selling it to China so cheaply that it doesn't even pay for the transportation. We're basically giving giving Wyoming away. And there are people who want her to stop that. She wants to stop it, but that's not her job. Her job is to make sure that the coal cars on the train are such and such a consistency and that they're packed a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. And although she's doing something that she knows is hurting the earth, hurting this country, probably hurting China too, although she knows that, that's not her. We've created a system where the knowing of our hearts is not something that we can do in the world, okay? And what we have to do is change that picture. We have to recognize that something may make money, but it may be immoral. That making money should not be our primary goal. Now, as soon as I say that, I become a heretic in this society. As soon as I say that, I become an outcast of this society. A long time ago, I made my peace with my values, and I said, money is not my primary value. If it was, the background would not be an adequate sized apartment. The background would be some mansion, and I'd have my 40 Rolls Royces out front, and I'd be pushing my view to buy all my books, etc., so that I can be. I had to write myself a quick note here. So that I can be the kingpin here. But that's not the goal. Everything I do, I try to exemplify the fact that that's not the goal. So I really like my apartment, but it's a very modest and simple apartment. I really like my car, but it's a 21-year-old Toyota. Okay. Now, you don't, if I needed to get prestige from my car, that's the last car in the world that you would get, where you say, oh, hey, look at me. I'm driving my 21-year-old Toyota. I was, when I was still living in Charlotte, North Carolina, I had a meeting with a guy, and he was late for the meeting, and 10 minutes late. So he comes in, he apologizes, and he says, I was late returning my test car because I was just testing a new Mercedes. Now, I knew this guy was driving a BMW and was only 2 years old. But I realized something. It wasn't that the car he had was faulty in some way. It's that it didn't feed his heart, because that's not what cars are for. It didn't feed his soul. That's not what cars are for. But that's what they're sold as. You will feel better about yourself if you buy this. You'll feel better about yourself if you buy that. And after you buy all this fecal matter that we're selling, we're then going to sell you the antidepressant pills, and then you'll feel better. So our challenge is, let's do this differently. So that every time I say, I am perfectly happy with a 21-year-old car. I'm perfectly happy in a small apartment. I don't need 2 or 3 houses, or Jennifer Lopez, 35 multi-million-dollar houses that are her personal property. She doesn't rent them out. She can't even visit each of these houses in a month. And that's a sign of money addiction and money sickness. And we have to talk about this as what it is, that if you're a billionaire, you are sick. There's a sickness inside of you. Let me clarify that in for a minute. I said 10 minutes, but it looks like it might be a little more. I had a friend, and this guy was a billionaire, James Rouse, head of the Rouse Corporation. And what the Rouse Corporation did was create malls. They created the first mall. They made lots and lots of malls, and James made a lot of money. So I met him and his wife when they were in their 80s. And he said, Sharif, I'm worth $7 billion. And he said, I kind of think that's enough money. And his wife starts laughing. And he said, the problem is, I really like what I do. I like working. I like the work that I do. And if I'm working, I can't help but make money. So what I've decided to do is not give my money away, but to give the engine that creates the money away. So he took the Rouse Corporation, took the whole corporation, and he created a nonprofit company to create affordable housing for people. And the funding they got to create the affordable housing is the funding of Rouse Corporation continuing to do what it was doing. And the interesting thing about that story is he had to incorporate that in Canada. The US laws would not allow someone to give their money away like that, would not allow them to give away the engine of production like that. Let me share 2 things with you. Number one, for those of you who order Creating a World That Works for All over the next day or 2, I'll extend this till Monday evening. There's my prop. I'm going to include a couple of the, let's see how I can do this, creating a world that works for all pins. And when I go outside, whoops, wrong side. When I go outside, I put my pin on. And people look at that and they get this look on their face like, is that Democrat or Republican? And once in a while I get people brave enough uh, to ask me a question, and I talk about what that means, about that is a meta vision. This is the vision that other visions hang under. That's the umbrella over those visions. So if you want to do something about global climate change, why? Because I want to create a world that works for all. You want to do something about our racial divides, why? Because I want to create a world that works for all. Once you get that biggest vision, then everything else lines up. Will defunding or dismantling the police department create a world that works for all? No, it won't. It just won't. Will transforming the police department into a 21st century security force that basically is non-violent, where we put the police out there without guns. Will that change things? You bet it will. Some of you may be familiar with the Oregon Country Fair, the last watering hole for hippiedom in our society. And I was actually invited to speak at the country fair some years ago, and I got to see what a 21st century security system actually looks like. They get 40,000 people a day at the Oregon Country Fair, and they have no police inside their gate. There may be some undercover officers there, but they are not allowed in the gate. And the country fair folks have to do all of the policing. And they have a very interesting police challenge because a number of people who come to the fair are on the wrong cocktail of drugs, and they act out, many times violently. They also get their share of fundamentalists and right-wingers who come there because they're going to save all these heathens or consign them all to hell, etc. And they've got to control those elements. And so they have real world challenges, and they do a fantastic job over 40 years of controlling that. And I saw this actually happening with my own eyes. So this isn't something I heard. I saw this. This person at one of the junction points starts having a really, really bad trip, and he's screaming and he's running after people. And all of a sudden, I mean, within 20 seconds or so, he is surrounded by people with these drums and tambourines, and they're jumping up and down at the same time, and they're laughing and they're banging the drums and the tambourines, and they dance him off of the main corridor. And they have these this is in the middle of a field, so they have these petitions that they call walls, and the walls have these invisible doors in them, and they took him right out of one of these invisible doors off the main thoroughfare. That's the last the fair people saw of him. Well, because I had an all-access pass, I went behind to see what they were doing, and they had this guy sitting down, and this woman was holding both of his arms, so she was restraining him. but she is making eye contact with him and talking in this really reasonable voice. You know, what did you drink? What did you eat? What did you inject? What's going on? Do you want some water? She was there to help him and was providing minimal control to make sure that he didn't hurt himself, and he didn't hurt her, and didn't hurt anybody else. Now, think about that. If that is the goal of your policing force, what kind of weaponry do you need? What kind of lethality, what kind of damage control do you need when your goal is, how do I help you? How can I help you not hurt yourself, not hurt others, not hurt me? That becomes a very different modality for our policing, and that becomes something that I think that is a real challenge for our society. We don't get there unless we hold the vision, and we hold the vision of a 21st century security force that every single member of the community must contribute to. There's no reason why I can't go out on a patrol with my neighbors to get me, to help me with my neighbors, with the police force, with training, okay, so to get us out of the old mindset. Part of the old mindset is control, and part of the old mindset is, I'm going to control your behavior. I'm going to put you down. Now, how many times have you seen the images of people face down on the sidewalk, hands cuffed behind their back, with the police standing over them? And tell me if you've ever seen a white person in that position. I've never, ever heard of a white person being face down on the sidewalk, because a white officer can look at you and say, oh yeah, you look like me. I don't need to control you. What happens when we actually can open our hearts, and we're encouraged by the system to open our hearts and treat other human beings the way that I actually want to be treated? Okay, so I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to read from the conclusion to The Power of One: Authentic Leadership in Turbulent Times. Let me say something about this book. We recently pulled this out of print after 33 years in continuous print. Many books nowadays aren't in print for 33 months, let alone 33 years. And the publisher was New Society Publishers, and we decided that I needed to rewrite it. They said that the examples are just too creaky in here. I'm talking about, Saddam Hussein and George Bush the first, let alone the second. So I'm furiously writing right now to elevate this one. But I want to read to you from the. I should say, I still have copies of this. The new one won't be out for another year or so, and this is now a collector's item. If you go on Amazon to buy it, I think that they're charging $40. I'm charging probably $14. So so much for Amazon. I want to read to you from the conclusion, which probably is not going to change. New times and new issues call for a new direction. A few brave souls may venture a protest. There's nothing I can do about the Middle East or pollution or why the price of everything is so high. I'm just one person. What power does one person have to change the world? The answer is easy. The power of compassion. When military might has rusted, when temporal fame has vanished, when all worldly powers have come to an end, the true power of compassion can be felt. Great cities turn to dust. Beauty fades. The strong become weak and feeble, but the compassionate truly will inherit the earth. What can the compassionate do to correct our modern day problems? Everything. Compassion is the light which drives out the darkness. Fear, egotism, and arrogance causes us to ignore the pain and suffering of others. Learning compassion, that ultimately I am you, will provide the energy for the profound societal shift necessary for our salvation. So it is with hope, it is with compassion, and it's with holding a vision that I leave you. And I leave you with a prayer. It's what I call the inclusivity prayer. This is a prayer that anybody can say, even all the way down to an atheist. And it's a modification of the Buddhist prayer that goes, may all beings be well, may all beings be secure, and may all beings be happy. The modification is this. It's in 3 parts. The first part of this is, may I be well, may I be secure, and may I be happy. You remember from riding on the airplane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first. You are not in a position to change our world until you have done the work to change yourself. Second part is, may you be well, may you be secure, and may you be happy. And when you're doing that, I ask you to think of 2 people and you're talking to them directly. One is the person that you find it easiest to practice inclusivity with, the person you find it easiest to open your heart and be in love with. Could be a spouse, could be family, could be your next door neighbor. And then I also, when you're saying, may you be well, may you be secure, and may you be happy, I want you to think of someone that is the most difficult for you to open your heart toward, most difficult for you to connect with, most difficult for you to practice inclusivity with. That could be a spouse, that could be a neighbor, could be a family member. And then the last part of it is, may all beings be well, may all beings be secure, may all beings be happy. And when you're saying this, I want you to think of all beings, my living green family behind me here, your trees outside, even the parts that are not particularly nice to you, like your mosquitoes, and to literally hold the energy of all of us on this planet, living on this planet together. And so I'm going to invite you to put your hands together and repeat with me, may I be well, may I be secure, may I be happy. May you be well, may you be secure, may you be happy. May all beings be well, may all beings be secure, and may all beings be happy. Thank you. And goodbye.